Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Stand Strong Stories. I know I've been teasing you guys about this for a while now, and the time has finally come where I reveal to you, and I am proud to announce the newest division of Stand Strong, a podcast focused on sharing the stories of other people out there who have gone through hard times and overcame the obstacles. Stand Strong Stories is focused on identifying and highlighting what somebody has gone through, how they got through it, what lessons they learned, and what they can share with you guys out there who are still struggling. So to kick things off, I am going to be my own first guest. I'm going to be sharing my story with you guys. A lot of you are familiar with me on TikTok for my Reasons to Stay Alive series, my aggressive encouragement. All of my content is focused around mental health. And joining me tonight is going to be a very special friend of mine by the name of Kent Dacus. Kent is a gentleman that I met back in 2018 working for a startup company. And Kent and I connected quickly. He had lost his best friend to suicide, and I lost my father. We really aligned on the mission. And when I shared my idea for Stand Strong with Kent, he really helped me bring things to reality. He helped me build my first website, he helped me file my LLC, and he helped me put this podcast together. Kent's been a dear friend of mine over the past few years and has been a big part of making this all happen, so I couldn't think of anybody better to have for my first episode. So thank you guys for being here, and stick around. I think it's going to be a good episode. Be sure to head over and check out Stand Strong, where we make clothing and accessories designed to bring awareness to suicide and mental health. We make all our products ourselves in-house, and we even have stickers with our designs on them. Use promo code STORIES20 and save yourself 20% off all products in store, and let Stand Strong serve as a reminder to you and everyone around you to stand strong even when you feel like falling. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Stand Strong Stories, guys. I've been teasing y'all about this for a while, and here it is. Today is a very special day. It is November 11th, 2022. Which is Stand Strong's 3-year anniversary, which is just a huge milestone. I'm so proud of this. But it's also Veterans Day, so shout out to my other vets out there. Thank you for your service. I appreciate you. There's also another little hidden Easter egg around 11/11, and if you can find it, drop it in the comments. I still haven't had anybody been able to pick up on that yet, so we'll see what happens. So moving into this, to start off, I'm going to be sharing my story, and we got a very special guest here, my buddy Kent Dacus. Kent has been rocking with me since the very beginning. Me and Kent met in 2018 working at a startup company together, and we connected rather quickly because Kent actually lost his best friend to suicide, and I lost my father. So we connected on that, and we had this shared vision of trying to put something together that was going to help other people in situations like my father and his friend. And I pitched this idea to Kent, the idea that I had for Stand Strong years and years ago, and he helped me bring it to reality. I mean, you helped me set up the LLC. You helped me build the website. You helped me put this podcast together. I mean, you're a very special guest to have on for episode 1, man. We've been working on this for a long time, and it's finally here. So, Kent, we've been talking about this for years, man. Kent was actually the first person who brought up the idea to me to start a podcast. And at that time, I mean, this was before I started making content on TikTok. This was before I started live streaming. And, I was very, very camera shy for a long time. It took me quite some time before I was able to comfortably sit down and speak in front of people. And I got to say, man, you really helped pull that out of me, though. I got to give you credit for that, man.
Well, you're doing pretty good at it, I'd say. And, I think what's really important is that over the last several years, you've touched so many people with your message and your brand and your story, and so many people have reached out to you. And I think that's been a really great starting point for this is this just inbound activity of stories that have come in and people who have gone through their own Stand Strong, their own version of Stand Strong, I should say. Their own stories.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the idea of a podcast, but we didn't really have any direction for it.
Yeah.
But, over the last 3 years of doing Stand Strong, I mean, how many people have reached out and shared their stories with us? And I just realized not everybody's going to be able to relate to my story, but they might be able to relate to somebody else out there. And if we can give them a platform to share that story, I mean, how many more people could that impact? I've been so amazed and grateful to see the impact that this has already had on people just with the clothing brand. But, when I moved into doing like content creation and live streaming, that was a whole nother beast.
Yeah. I know you've sprinkled your story into your streams and into your content. I think now this is a great opportunity to put a more comprehensive perspective in place on, your story, where you came from and why you're here, why we're doing this today. And, why now? Right.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Start at the beginning. where did you come from? What's your childhood like, and what set you up to become Stand Strong?
Oh, I guess when Jimmy was a wee lad, I mean, it wasn't so bad. I mean, everything was kind of normal growing up, and I feel like as I started to get older, I really had a lot of trouble like focusing and stuff. I wasn't good in school. I was good at sports, but my dad was one of those people that like pushed me too hard in the sports that he wanted me to play. And, as I got older, I started to turn away from that, and school wasn't really my thing. And I was kind of a bad kid, believe it or not. I mean, I got expelled my junior year for repeated offenses. I wasn't on a good path. And I think growing up, a big part of it for me, and this is why I like to use my platform to talk about this, and I think a lot of men were raised with that bottle it up mentality. As a kid, when I was going through something, I was never able to voice that. I was just, suck it up, be a man about it. Boys don't cry. I think because of that, I became angry. And as I started to experience more emotion in my life, it came out as rage. That was the most masculine way that I could let go of my emotions. And I mean, it just wasn't productive. So I got expelled my junior year, and then I came back in my senior year. And my senior year was when I started to get myself together. When I got expelled, I got sent to this place called, I'm not even going to say the name of it. It's a school for bad kids. And when I got there is when I realized I was like, I'm not going anywhere good, and I'm getting there fast, And I just had this realization. I was like, what the hell am I doing? So I got back into school my senior year. And then a few months into it, my father took his own life. And I think that was obviously a major wake-up call for me. But that was what made me understand, like, okay, the way I was taught to deal with my mental health, the way that I was taught to deal with my emotions obviously doesn't work. If you bottle everything up, you're going to hit that breaking point at some point. It's a matter of time. You're a ticking time bomb when you close yourself off from getting help or asking for help. And it took me a long time to realize that. I mean, the concept of Stand Strong came in 2010. My father died in 2011, but in 2010 is when, I don't even remember why. I think I was coming up with tattoo ideas. My 18th birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get tattoos down the back of my legs. And I wanted to get words that represented something to me. And I came up with Stand Strong. And what that represented to me was, stand strong even when you feel like falling. Always keep pushing. At that time is when I started to kind of come out of that toxic time in my life where I was like, okay, I'm trying to get it together now. I've been through a lot already, but I can go somewhere else if I try hard enough. And that's what Stand Strong represented to me. When I lost my father, that was when it really solidified in my mind. That was what I needed at that time, was what I refer to as the Stand Strong mentality, just pushing through no matter what obstacle comes in your way. At that time I was trying to actually do good in school. So when I started my senior year, I had 9.5 credits and I needed 21 to graduate. I was not a good student. Even when I was in school, I didn't do anything, but most of the time I wasn't in school. So I had a lot of catching up to do my senior year. And prior to my dad dying is when I started to get my stuff together. I'm like, all right, I'm really going to, buckle down and grind this year because I need to. I need to try to get myself on track. And that Stand Strong mentality is what pushed me to do it. But when my dad died, that was when I was like, okay, this is my only option now. I remember, I found my dad about 2 hours after it happened. And trigger warning for anybody out there, my father shot himself. It was a messy scene, and that was hard to discover. Obviously, I mean, that's one of those things that you'll never be able to get rid of. And I remember sitting on the floor in front of him when I found him. Like I sat there for, it felt like an eternity, but it was realistically probably like 10 seconds. And I remember in my head, I just said, I can either let this break me or I can let this make me stronger, and I could do something good with it. Ever since that moment, that has been my mission, because I felt like when I lost my dad, I felt like he died in vain. Unless I did something, I had to make something good out of his experience to make sure that it wasn't for nothing. I think maybe part of it was just me pushing myself, because I realized that I had to be the man of the house now, and I had to get it together, because at that time, I was getting it together already, but it still wasn't all there. But when I lost him, I was like, I have no other choice. I have to be there for my mom and my sister. And, I've tried therapy. I've tried medication over the years, and it wasn't something that stuck for me. It wasn't something that I felt like was a good fit. mainly because medication made me feel disconnected, and therapy made me feel like talking to someone who didn't value it enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather talk to a friend who I know like cares about me and not someone who's getting paid to listen to me. And that's no, I'm not going to sit here and knock therapy or medication. You know, it wasn't a good fit for me. That doesn't mean it doesn't work for other people. But, you know, for me, what it came down to was just completely pushing through that stand strong mentality to just keep moving forward no matter what.
I want to go back to your comment on the therapy and talking to people, talking to friends. You mentioned in 2018 we met, and in 2017 I lost my best friend. He shot himself, and you know I'd never been through tragic loss like that before in my life. You know, we'd had family members pass unexpectedly, those kinds of things, but nothing quite to that extreme. And I didn't know what to do about it. Didn't know who to talk to. And when I met you, and I met others in the organization who shared that experience with us, that had lost someone in this way, that's what helped me get through. You know, I didn't know much about the stand strong mentality at that time or what you were really all about, but I knew that you understood that. You know, you understood what that loss felt like, what survivor's guilt felt like, and how you have to push through it and how you have to keep going. And you know, it doesn't stop. You know, that's the beginning, right? I mean, I can imagine with you, you had to be there to find your dad. There's all the process that happens afterwards, and there's getting his stuff and what do you do with his stuff after he's gone, and what do you do with his memory, and is there something you could have done, right? And the survivor's guilt that comes with that. So for me, you know, the connection we were able to have intrinsically because of what we experienced like this, that's what helped me get through it. And I think that's the part where therapy sometimes comes short is, yeah, somebody's there to listen and to be there for you, but it doesn't mean they always understand it, you know? And
that's a really interesting point to bring up, because you don't know if that person can connect with you. Connecting with anybody on anything is hard enough these days. I think a lot of people have lost somebody this way, but a lot of the time we don't want to talk. It's hard to talk about. It really is.
I think for a long time it was embarrassing to talk about. If you said, "Oh, I know, you know, a friend of mine committed suicide," you know, there's a stigma with that.
Oh, yeah.
Is unfortunate. It's like, well, no, that person was struggling. You know, let's unpack that and figure out how we can prevent that in the future versus let's shy away from it. I mean, Jimmy, I don't know about you, but after that happened, you know, and yourself included here, I've discovered people in my life who had lost someone to suicide. And there were so many people I had absolutely no idea had lost someone in their life to suicide until I just said, "Hey, my best friend took his own life." And then they opened up. "Oh, my brother, my son, you know, your dad." Right. I mean, that started conversation for me. And I think that's where I found that alignment with Stand Strong. Right. Is that conversation. And it's, as you always say, it's more than a t-shirt, right? It's a mentality. It's it's a way of life.
First, I want to, you know, go back to, you were talking about how many people out there who have lost somebody. That is the one thing that never stops amazing me about making the content that I make. I mean, my platform on TikTok, you would not believe, I every time I make a video that does well and people relate to, you know, losing somebody or the feeling of not wanting to be here anymore. I mean, you know, every time we get into that headspace, we're always feeling so alone. But if only you knew how many others there were. You have no idea.
Yeah, for real.
You know, I mean, I had no idea until I started making content around it. And when I did, I had thousands and thousands of people commenting, "Oh, they've been through something similar, or they feel the same way." It's truly amazing because so many people out there relate to it, but so few people talk about it. But I had this realization one day. I mean, I remember every time I found myself in that negative headspace, because there was a number of occasions where I found myself not wanting to be here anymore. But every time I found myself there was like some little sign that the universe gave me, or whatever you want to call it. It would be like, I'd be driving down the highway and I would see like a billboard, or it would be, you know, graffiti on a wall or something that was just like, "Hey, it's not your time yet." Like, I took it as a little message, a little like bit of divine intervention saying, "Hey, you need to stick around for a while." And I'm like, what if I just put these messages on shirts? You know, I think I was at like Walmart or something. And I was just like, damn, I read people's shirts a lot. There was some guy standing in front of me in line and I was reading his shirt. I'm like, what a great way it is to share a message. And then the light bulb went off. I'm like, what if I just put the message, my message, the Stand Strong mentality, just put that out there floating around all over the place, people wearing them. I mean, how many people do you encounter on a daily basis, even on like a slow day, right? You go to the gas
Sure.
station, you go to a restaurant, you go anywhere, and how many people are going to see that? How many people are out there suffering in silence and need that little sign? And you'll never even know. You will never know that shirt did anything for them, or, you know, how that's affected people around you. But, you know, I get comments on this all the time. Like, people will come into my live streams and be like, you know, every time I wear your shirts, I get so many comments about it. And that very rarely happens to me. Like, and I kind of chalk it up to me just looking like a dick. I mean, I don't look like the friendliest guy when I'm out in public. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I'm beelining through Walmart, just, you know, or whatever store I'm at with that grumpy boy face, because I don't want to be there. I don't like, you know, I get very anxious in social settings. So I kind of have this demeanor about me that I think makes people feel like I'm probably not friendly. Like, I've had it happen a couple times where somebody's approached me and said something about it, and it amazes me every time. Like, when someone just like connects with that message, is something as simple as a t-shirt, and it hit them hard enough that they would come up and say something to me. That's impactful.
Yeah, I think the community that's been built through Stand Strong is a testament of that. And you know, the people who will share their stories with you, they share it with the others in Facebook groups, and you know, there's a degree of vulnerability here that isn't something that's practiced very often or really spoken about very often. And even just like getting in front of a microphone and camera and talking about how you lost your dad, how you found him, not many people would just have the guts to sit there and tell that story. You know, I know that that's had a tremendous impact on you. And I want to talk about that a little bit further, though. That's one of the pivots that happened in your life. You're just talking about how you had problems with school, you know, in and out of trouble in school, and, you know, how that went. And then this happened. And then once that happened, it seems like you're, you know, I know we've had these conversations outside of this, but it seems like after that point, things started to really change for you. And, you know, I think it's important to talk about this, though. When kids grow up without a father, right, they're statistically more likely to be hooked on drugs and, you know, be in jail and drop out of school and all those kinds of things. And for you, it was very different. You know, you could have gone down that path, but you didn't. You chose to go down a much more productive path, and one that had purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know, talk about that a little bit more, that purpose, and where you went from, okay, I found my dad, this is crazy, I can't believe this just happened, to I need to do something about this.
I think the best tool for dealing with grief is acceptance. Like, you can't change it. There's no amount of work that I can do. There's no amount of, you know, obsessing that I can do that's going to bring my dad back. All I can do now is make the best out of the hand that I was dealt. And what that means to me is doing everything I can to try to make sure that someone else doesn't have to experience that. And I can only do so much, and that's a hard pill for me to swallow. It's like, you wish that you could help everybody, but I mean, I knew off the rip, like, you know, the shirts were a starting point, but I didn't know how far that would go, and I've just been trying to take it further and further each step of the way. You know, I mean, how many times have you and I sat down and kind of evaluated the way that Stand Strong was going, and we're like, all right, this is the next wave. This is what we need to do next. I was doing the shirts first, and then I started making content. And you told me to kind of lean more into the mission. And I think that was a really, something that really stuck with me. And I was like, you're right, dude. Like, I could really get this message out on a larger scale if I focused my content on sharing the message rather than like trying to talk about my small business or something, you know? And then the Facebook group, you know, the Facebook group, I think, is definitely one of the better resources I've come up with since we've started this. And for those of you who are just listening, we have a Facebook group called Standing Strong. It's a private Facebook group. It's just an online support group. Regular people who have gone through real shit, people who are there to support each other or get things off their chest and just kind of be there for each other. The amount of support that I've seen people get just from my community, that makes my heart so happy. Like, people will post in the Facebook group, and a lot of the time, like, I'll see them, like, I'll scroll through and I'll check stuff out sometimes, but I don't always have the time to really get in depth and respond the way that I want to. You know, between making content, making clothes, you know, getting all this set up, trying to maintain my personal life, it gets exhausting. But seeing the way that people in the group and in the community look out for each other, it's a beautiful thing. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is not even the work that I've done, but the community that I've built around it, because people are there for each other. It's like, you might not want to talk to the therapist. You come into this group and somebody out there is willing to talk to you, and they might be able to relate to what you've gone through. I mean, it's beautiful.
We should back up a second here. So you were talking about you know, you got to move to that acceptance phase of grief and where that's going to take you next. And, you know, I think that's an important transition here because there's quite a gap between when your father passed and when Stand Strong really became a formalized and in-market thing. Talk about that period between there a little bit. What set up your transition to becoming a small business owner and actually moving forward with bringing this to market?
We're going to have to dig into that one, buddy. You know,
There's a lot that happened in that time period.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that you know the background here, but yeah, that was it was an eventful few years. I mean, so that happened when I was 18, and from 18 to 19, I think I was working at Walmart at the time, actually. So then from 19 to 20, I was working, I got a job at this factory. I was a press operator at a tool and die company. We would stamp car parts out of sheet metal. I was making good money for my age at the time, but I had gotten promoted so quick. I picked up on the job quickly and I got pretty good at it. And I kind of like hit my glass ceiling at that job. And I remember I was like 20 years old and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, you know, this is good money now, but like when I have kids and I'm married or, you know, wherever else I go in life, when I'm older, I was like, I don't think it's sustainable. About a year before that, one of my buddies had joined the Navy, and the military had never really crossed my mind. It wasn't something that like I was actively seeking, but my buddy, he joined and he was an aircraft mechanic, but he was a P3 guy. He worked on P3 Orions. So he wasn't a boat guy. You know, he went into the Navy in aviation and never had to step foot on a boat. So I was like, oh, I'm going for that. I'm terrified of water. I don't like water at all. So what do? I join the Navy.
It's ironic though, because your favorite animal is a shark.
It is. There's a lot behind that. We'll get into that. But in 2012, I went to the Cleveland Air Show, and that was the first time I had ever seen the Navy Blue Angels perform. And that was a game changer for me. I'd never been on a plane. I've never seen a jet. I'd never seen a helicopter. You know, I grew up in a low-end little part of Ohio. It wasn't something I saw a lot. So I went to the Cleveland Air Show, and I was like, oh my God, these machines are amazing. Like, this is what I want to do. I made my decision right then and there. I was like, okay, I know my buddy's an aircraft mechanic, and now that I see these things, I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I went to the Navy recruiter, and I actually got shot down the first time. The recruiter had asked, I don't even remember what he asked me. Maybe if I smoked or something, and I told him too much, basically. And he was like, nope, you're disqualified. Like, get out of here. And I'm like, ooh. So I waited for that recruiter to get to change commands. And then I went back to the same place when there was a new recruiter on the job, and I went and talked to that guy. And that time I knew what not to tell him. So I want to say 6 months later, I was shipping off to boot camp as an aircraft mechanic. You know, that was really more so, I thought it would be a cool experience. I wanted to travel. I wanted to do something that I felt proud of, you know. Working on aircraft for the Navy, that's something I could be proud of, you know. And that was the biggest move I had ever made at the time. I'd never been on a plane. I'd never left Ohio up until that point. That was a big turning point for me, because it was when I left for the Navy, I traveled so much. I met so many people from so many different walks of life. And it made me understand the importance of perspective. There are people out there who have an entirely different outlook on life that so far exceeds my small town way of thinking. And it changed everything for me. I'm like, okay, there is so much more I have to learn. Everywhere you go, just in the United States, everywhere you go, every different state, different cities in different states, people are different. You can learn from everything and everyone around you. And I think like that's one thing I will recommend to everybody. If you can do it, travel. Talk to people in different places. Get the understanding of people from different walks of life. Perspective is everything. And that's a big part of, you know, what we hope to achieve with this podcast is to challenge perspectives. That was what changed everything for me. I went my whole life in this negative mindset. And that was kind of wrapping back to what I said earlier, growing up with that understanding of dealing with your mental health by bottling things up. You become a very negative person. So I grew up with this mentality of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But I was always prepared for the worst. So what was I really looking for? You know, it's like it's easy to spot a red car if you're always thinking about a red car. So if you're always thinking about something to be mad about or angry about, you're going to find that.
Find it.
And through my experience in the Navy, I met some of the most positive people that I've ever met in my life that left such a serious impact on me. You know, growing up in my area, it was like, I thought that to be feared was to be respected. And I realized while I was traveling, I'm like, the most respected people I've ever met are the kindest. Yeah. They're the most positive.
You know, it's interesting you say that. It's like for a lot of people, and I think when they're dealing with grief, change of environment can bring that change of perspective. Like, think about it. Had you not joined the military, had you not changed your environment, had you not made that monumental shift in your life, you might never experience that. You might still be exactly where you were.
I will say I don't think I would be anywhere close to where I am if I didn't have that experience. And this is not me recruiting anybody. I mean, obviously it's not for everybody. I remember when I got to boot camp, I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, how did I end up here? You know, but it also taught me a lot about like self-discipline. And I think that was something that I really needed. You know, I was pretty impulsive. I would tell anybody exactly how I felt. And like when you're going to boot camp, it's like, all right, you got to learn to follow directions. And that was something I had a problem with. I would say growing up, I had a problem with authority. And when I went to boot camp, I was like, all right, well, I want this bad enough that I'm going to have to deal with this. I'm just going to have to deal with this for the next few years, get my experience, because I want to see what it's like out there. I want to travel. I've already met so many cool people in boot camp from so many different walks of life. Who else am I going to meet? So that kind of kept me in check. And I think I needed that. But I don't think that I ever would have outgrown that, like I said, that small, the small town way of thinking that I grew up around if I didn't leave. And, you know, I lived in Florida for a little while. I went to boot camp in Chicago. Then I went to A school in Florida. I was in Florida for like 6 months, and I met some of the best friends of my life while I was in A school. And then I got stationed out in Whidbey Island, Washington. And Washington, I left my heart there, man. That is the Pacific Northwest is hands down my favorite place in the United States. That I've been, at least. The vibe out there is completely different, man. Like, the beauty of nature. That's one thing that I've always found very therapeutic, was nature. And I think that's one thing that was kind of rough for me in Ohio. You know, it's like this time of the year, all the trees, all the leaves are gone. Everything just looks dead. It's sad. You go to the Pacific Northwest and it's green all year round. I mean, just giant pine trees. It's beautiful. And the people out there are so much different. The way they think, the way they conduct themselves. And I learned so many new things, and I evolved as a person, I would say. But I think the biggest part of that was keeping an open mind and being understanding and accepting and listening to what other people had to say. If there's anything I know, it's that I don't know anything. There's so much to learn. One of my favorite quotes, and those of you who have been in my streams before, you hear me say this all the time. Any man who knows a thing knows he knows not a damn thing at all. Stay hungry to learn.
It's a good one.
That's part of the shark thing. Always hungry, always moving forward, always growing.
I like it.
Yeah.
Now, so you're in the Pacific Northwest, and then you leave the military, you come back to Cleveland. Is it safe to say you were kind of floating at that point? You were in between things.
And I'm glad that you bring this up, because I think something that's very important, especially we're launching this on Veterans Day. So this is something I want to say for the vets and for family or friends of vets. Getting out of the military was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I know that sounds so strange. Like, I lost my father in the way that I lost him. You guys heard me talk about this, but I still think one of the hardest places I've ever been was getting out of the military. And I didn't do anything wild. I was an aircraft mechanic, you know? I sat on a boat and fixed planes. You know, I didn't have to see combat. I didn't have to do anything that typically you would associate with that kind of trauma. But when you get out of the military, you're starting over. You're in a new area. You're meeting new people. I mean, unless you stay where you were at when you got out, I think that might make it a little bit easier. But like getting out and coming home, you know, I left this place behind me 4 years ago, and now I'm just right back to where I left off, and I don't know anybody anymore. I feel like I've outgrown the mentality of my area, and it was very hard for me to reconnect with people. You know, in the military, you have this insane level of camaraderie, because it's like we're all just dealing with the same shit together all the time. The people that you work with become your best friends, and you guys are like lifelong friends after that. When you get out, you lose that, and it's hard to find something fulfilling. It's like, you know, I was an aircraft mechanic in the Navy, so when I got out, it's like, what can I do that's going to top that? You know, I was proud of that. I had good friends in the area. I had good friends that I served with. And now what? I think right after I got out, I jumped into doing construction with my cousin's boyfriend, and I was making no money. I was the only laborer on a 3-man crew. So we were building houses, and I was the only guy carrying the bags of cement. And, you know, it was an exhausting job, and I wasn't getting paid shit for it. And, you know, the dude that I was working for was kind of a dick. So I was very unhappy. I was living with my mom. I had nobody. You know, I remember when I got home, I tried, like, I was putting posts out on Facebook and stuff. I'm like, hey, guys, I'm home. Like, does anybody want to hang out? And I could not reconnect with anybody. Like, even the people that I did try to reconnect with, I didn't feel connected to. I didn't feel like I was vibing with them the way that I used to, because
You
they
had
were
changed.
still kind of in that small town way of thinking that I tried to get away from. So when I came back, man, it was honestly a nightmare. And then, I didn't last too long doing the construction. I was there for probably 4 or 5 months, but I had a new opportunity where I was just doing some like freelance handyman work, which is actually, the start of what brought you and I together. The family that I was doing work for was the same people who started this startup. And, it was just like simple, at first I think I remodeled a house for one of them. And then after that, it was just like, doing stuff around their house, and their neighbors were hiring me to come do stuff. I wasn't happy, and I think that was a big part of me pulling myself out of that hard time, was finding purpose. I felt so lost for so long, especially when I got out of the military, where I had no sense of direction, and finding purpose is what kind of pulled me out of it. But, and that's kind of what brought you and I together. So once I got done with that, I needed a new opportunity. And this family had kind of recruited me. They're like, hey, you've been working for us for a while. These were family friends. They're like, we're starting this company up, and it's going to help people with whatever. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole of what these guys do or any of that. But I took that opportunity, and that's what brought us together. Is we were aligned with the mission behind that company. And that was another turning point right there. I think that was probably one of the bigger ones for sure.
It's crazy if you were to plot this as like a flow chart. You have a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and a lot of ups, and so there's a really great book that I read recently called The Second Mountain. And it talks about these valleys you go through in life, and these climbs you have to come up, and, you hit that valley coming out of school, and you're losing your father. Then you start to go up that first mountain, and your first mountain is the military, and that discipline and that growth you were just talking about, and that perspective and the environment and camaraderie. And you come back to another valley, right? And I've got to imagine when you get out, you come home, I'm sure a lot of those memories came back, everything you left behind, and what you'd come through, and you kind of, sometimes, running towards something is just as effective, if not more effective, as running away from it. And you're moving towards something in the military, you're traveling, you're experiencing the world, and you think you leave this part of your life behind you, and then you come back home. And I'm sure there's a lot of that just starts to kind of rush back and creep back in, and you've got to work to keep that at bay and take all those learnings you just took from the military and really, set your boundaries. And I think just in the short time that I've known you, we've had a lot of conversations around boundaries and how you've learned through that perspective. That's how you keep yourself in control, and how you keep your mental health in check, as you set those boundaries in your life. When we met, right, in this startup environment, I had recently lost my friend, and the family that started the business, they knew your father. Mm-hmm. And so, I came into it with that same, looking for that kind of, I wanted to do something about it. Right. And I didn't really know what yet. And then I remember you walked in, and I didn't know who you were. I remember, the guy running the joint said he knew you, and you did some work for him, and you were a good dude, and he knew your dad, and he trusted you could do a good job.
I was a little less hairy back then, huh?
You certainly were. Yeah. And we come from two very different cuts of life, and that brought a lot of perspective for me as well. As I remember just sitting there and thinking, all right, let me see what this guy can do. Let me see what he's all about. And you walked in, you had your hoodie on that had the heart logo on it. Mm-hmm. And you had your Stand Strong. You started in the summer. You had your Stand Strong tattoo shown on the back of your leg. And I remember one of the first conversations we had, I said, what's up with the tattoo on the back of your legs? And that started this whole, that was it. That was the thing that started our relationship.
Well, it's fascinating that you bring that up, because that was a big part of why I decided to make Stand Strong a thing, because I just had these tattoos forever. But it wasn't anything to anybody else. It was just something that meant something to me. And still to this day, that's what I get comments on the most. I remember going everywhere. I've always been a shorts guy, and people all the time would stop me and tell me that they like my leg tattoos. And those of you who haven't seen them, there's a reason for that. They were house tattoos that I got when I was like 18. They look terrible. I don't like to show them off, but they're meaningful to me, and that's what matters. But yeah, I mean, when we met, and I think that there was a lot of value that came out of how different we were. We came from totally different areas, and we think so much different, but we connected in a way that people don't normally connect, and we realized that we complement each other very well. Our differences make us work well together. And this is something I like to talk about too when we're talking about mental health, okay? Especially for dudes that don't like to share. You and I, especially when we met, we weren't so open with each other. That took time.
Yeah.
But we never had a problem getting a second opinion on our work, right?
Yeah.
You were doing something totally different from me, and you'd call me and, hey, Jim, can you come check this out? And I would give you my feedback on it. And I would tell you if I thought it was a good or bad idea, and vice versa. I would call you in. Why is it that we always feel, as guys, why is it we always feel when we're facing a problem with ourselves that we have to deal with it on our own? Why can't we get a second opinion from one of our boys the way that we do with work? It makes sense, but it's just something that I feel like been conditioned to close ourselves off in that sense. And this is something the military taught me. Lead by example. Don't be the person who talks about it, be about it, So I was like, all right, well, if I want to see people opening up about their shit, I have to open up about mine. And that was fucking hard for me, dude, especially like on a public scale. Do you remember when we launched the website? I was panicking because the about section on the website, I was like, I cannot believe I'm sharing this intimate part of myself with anybody. I mean, anybody from anywhere in the world can just go on that website and read about why Stand Strong exists. And that was hard for me to put that out there. And that was a turning point for me too, because I'm like, damn, if it's that hard for me just to do this, and this is something I'm conscious of, I'm mindful of this, how hard is this for other people who aren't putting thought into this?
Well, and it had been quite some time had passed. It's not within a year or two, right? We're talking quite some time had passed since your dad passed. So you had that time to even internalize and process, and it's still
right.
That vulnerability of that situation still fresh.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that, because we're, the startup environment we're in, and anybody who's worked in a startup can understand the always on. It's very demanding, and Jimmy and I were working very long hours and felt like we were solving all the world's problems.
Yes.
And I think our relationship was very productive, and thankfully to this day still is. But the environment we were in certainly was not. And we start to see that toxic stuff creep in.
Yes.
I think you should talk about that a little bit, because you talk about just a minute ago, leading by example in the military, what that taught you, boundaries and perspective. And there was another really monumental shift that happens after this. And I think it's important to touch on that.
Well, I think the number one statement I want to make here is integrity. Integrity is everything. Do the right thing even when no one's looking. What we both realized, and the reason why we're not still with this company, is because, it started off for noble reasons. It was supposed to be something that helped people. It was supposed to be something that put the customer first in a way that was going to help with situations like what we're dealing with now. So it was something that we connected with, but it wasn't more than a few months into it, we started to realize this isn't about that. We saw people get greedy. We saw people turning against the mission to focus on money. And at that point, that's when we both said, we did not sign up for this. We got in this to make a difference, and we're not making a difference anymore, because the people who were in control of that organization at that time had completely lost focus of why they got into it to begin with, because it became lucrative to them. So then they just turned all their focus onto sales. And it wasn't about the customer anymore. It wasn't about helping people anymore. It was about grabbing as much as we can and living the best life we can. And I didn't want that. But I remember at that point, and this is when you and I had started collaborating on the idea of Stand Strong and some of the other ventures that you and your fiance had been working on. We're starting to learn the ins and outs of this. We see how it grows. We see how it scales. We played a huge part of making that happen for these guys. If they can do this, we can too, but we can keep each other in line with the mission. It's money comes and goes. Money is not my priority. At the end of the day, I can't take it with me. The only thing that I think, and I hope I can take with me, is the impact that I left behind on this world.
One of my favorite quotes about money is that people say money's the root of all evil. I don't necessarily believe that. I think money, and particularly more money, just brings out more of who you really are, right? I think we saw that, in that situation was, we didn't know them all that well. Right. But and for everyone's context, we started scaling from 0 to 1 million, right, within the first year. And that kind of growth gets to people's head really quick. And, I think we started to see that it just simply exacerbated what the culture actually was, who the people actually were, what their values actually were, what really important to them. And as you said, it wasn't the mission. And
No, I feel like they went so far off track that it became unrecognizable. Because I
yeah,
remember some of the conversations that you and I had had about, like, even launching new products for this organization. Well, how can this help with people who are experiencing this? That was our
yeah,
focus. They were like, in their mind, it was, oh, it's not expensive enough. People
yeah.
aren't, I can't make as much money off this product. And it's like, well, that's not what this is about, is it? That really,
It's an interesting turning point because, you, like you said, you have this productivity, right? You've hit this moment of growth, and you've taken these learnings, and you participated in the growth of a company to hit $1 million in its first year, right? But the integrity isn't there. And I remember you and I sat down and we had a very intense conversation about your future and what you wanted to do, and that this wasn't it. And there were a lot of conversations that were had internally as an organization that rubbed you the wrong way, and set up this idea of like, hey, I think I just want to do something different. I remember, you had that hoodie on that had the heart logo on, and I said, man, you can do this. You've got this figured out. You've got the idea. You've got the mission. Like, you can do this. And I think that was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was shortly after that you stepped away and you took that leap of faith to your next journey, which was actually starting a business, starting Stand Strong.
well,
and
yeah.
doing this.
I mean, when did I ended up walking out of that place. Like, we had a pretty serious dispute one day while I was there, and I actually ended up just walking out, like, out the door, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
At that time I realized, I was like, all right, if they can do it, so can I. Being in that environment showed me what not to do. So I paid attention to how they scaled. I knew what not to do, and I knew what areas I wanted to focus on, and that was making a difference. So when I left, I mean, what was that? That was
December of 18.
December of 18.
Because I left in January of 19.
Yeah, because I jumped back in for the winter, I think the winter semester of school. I used my GI Bill to get some income. And I was in school full time for the first year of having Stand Strong as well, probably the first year and a half, honestly. But I went back to school for a little bit, and that's how I was making my money. And during that time, I was taking my money from the GI Bill, and I was slowly buying piece by piece. I bought the lanyards, I bought the stickers, I bought the screen printing press. You remember when I set that up? I still have pictures that your fiance took. I started Stand Strong on my dining room table in my apartment. Just a little screen printing press I set up on a table. I had no idea how to make a shirt. I had no experience in screen printing or graphic design or running a business, but I figured it out on Google. There's a lot of information out there. I think the first design I ran was the fuck suicide design. I got my screen printing press in July of 19. And for the next, 3-4 months, from July till November, I was printing every day. I was like, and it was a huge learning curve. I've never done this. I mean, there's so much that goes into it that I didn't understand, but I just practiced and practiced and practiced, and I refused to give up. I was just going to Walmart and buying blank T-shirts and rags and stuff to print on. And it was a long learning process. And then November 11th of 2019 was when we launched Stand Strong. Another little Easter egg, the picture on the homepage of Stand Strong's website, both of them actually, the picture of me and the picture of Jen, those were from the first photo shoot we ever did. Those were the 2 original Stand Strong shirts that are on the homepage of the website.
There's a really important lesson here too, because again, you're in that valley, right? You're coming out of the military. You're talking about how you're finding your way. You're aligned on a vision. You think you found that purpose. You thought you had some footing there, right? And it was facade, right? It wasn't what it was cracked up to be. And that was a harsh reality.
With the startup?
You took this leap of faith. You were living at home. You got your apartment, right? And you moved out. You started a business. You went back to school, right? That valley was there. You were in it. And you just said, you know what? I'm coming back out. Right. And that's really important, because when you're doing something like this, that's, like the military was kind of like a leap of faith for you too.
Yeah.
You were changing your environment. You were changing something. All right, this isn't working. I need another push. That push was a bet on yourself, and a big bet.
Well, I think the mentality behind that for me has always been the only way to grow is to get out of your comfort zone. You're not going to grow sitting in a place that you're comfortable. I still to this day, I mean, even doing this podcast, I force myself out of my comfort zone because I know that that's the only way for me to understand my potential. You know, if I never would have left for the military, I never would have known what a good aircraft mechanic I was. If I didn't walk out of that startup and start my own thing, I never would have known that I was capable of doing that. It's like each time I'm teaching myself a lesson. And one thing I want people to like really take seriously is it's not even so much about like being good at something. It's about commitment. It's about setting a goal and staying focused on that goal. But the commitment that goes into it, you have to stay on top of it, because I didn't make any money. I didn't get a lot of support off the rip. And it was very, very easy for me to want to give up at that point. And I did. I wanted to so bad. I was like, dude, I could go find a job being an aircraft mechanic again and make a pretty, decent living. But that wasn't enough for me. I desired the freedom of working for myself, and I desired the purpose of what I was doing. The impact that I could make is what kept me going. Because at the beginning, I really wasn't making that much of an impact. It wasn't until I started making the content that things started to take off in a totally different direction. I mean, this whole organization went from my dining room table in my apartment to my roommate moving out unexpectedly and me setting up the screen printer in his room in my apartment to moving into my mom's basement. There was like probably a 8 or 9 month window where Stand Strong was operating out of my mom's basement. I didn't even live there. I would drive a half hour to my mom's house every day. I would just hang out there all day, just like hoping, like, I don't want to leave and then get another order and then have to come back here and make it. And, it got to a point where I was able to get my own place, and now my whole basement's a shop now. But it wasn't because I was better at anything than anybody else. It was just the refusal to give up. Even when times got hard, I just refused. I was like, I'm not going to stop doing this. Even if I have to struggle, I'm not going to stop, because this is more impactful than me going to work on planes or going and getting some factory job or whatever. I wanted to stay focused on my mission. I mean, for the first year and a half, I definitely could have given up and nobody would have noticed, But it was that refusal that got me to where I am. It was the refusal to stop. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. It's like, it's so easy to get discouraged by feeling like you're not doing as well as you should be. And that's not a failure on anyone's part. I think failure is only failure if you didn't learn something from it, Yeah,
100%.
So when I felt like I was failing, I focused on what I could learn from it. Like, okay, I'm not making enough money to pay my bills. Well, I also haven't posted very much this month. Maybe if I put a post or ran a promotion or tried something new. How long was your fiance trying to talk me into getting on TikTok?
Yeah. I think from day one.
Exactly. From day one. And I hit a plateau on Instagram and Facebook, but I also wasn't focused on video content. I was just at the time still posting pictures of my shirts. I wanted to hide behind the screen. I didn't want to be the face of anything. And I talk about this in my live streams sometimes. I never even once did it cross my mind that I wanted to be a content creator. That was not my intention by any means. I started making videos on TikTok to try to promote Stand Strong and try to share the message behind it. And one thing led to another, and here I am. If it's making a difference, then it's something I'm going full send on.
Well, you get what you give, right? And you're putting all into it, and you're starting to see those rewards from it in a lot of different ways. One of the rewards I think that was really unexpected is the way that it bridged a connection with you and your sister. I think that's something that is, a really unique moment in Stand Strong's growth. Because you got to remember, you started in 2019, COVID hits in 2020, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's shut in, life is upside down, that's a unique challenge in and of itself. And then shortly after that, I'll let you talk about it. Things started to change for you guys internally.
Well, as far as my sister goes, me and my sister had a pretty serious falling out. And this is a good talking point anyway, too, because it kind of illustrates how two people can go through the same situation and handle it completely different. It's about perspective. She saw it from a different angle that I did. I saw it as an opportunity to try to help someone else, and she saw it as a tragedy, which, I mean, there's no right way or wrong way. I'm not going to hold that against it. She was also a lot younger than me. That was, her world fell apart there. And big shout out to my sister. I love you, and I appreciate everything that you've done in the past like year and a half. So right after I got my screen printing press, right before I launched Stand Strong, is when me and my sister had a pretty serious falling out. And you know, my sister has her issues, but I do too. You know, we all have our issues. You know, this one was a pretty bad episode, I think, in both of our lives. And that lasted for years. And we reconnected about a year and a half ago. And, you know, I think a big part of that was we both had to swallow our pride. You know, and I've talked to people about this. When I talk about reconnecting with my sister, people ask me how do you do that? How do you repair a situation like that? Sometimes you just got to shut up and listen. And the other person has to do the same, though. You have to be able to feel each other out. You have to hear each other out and say, you know what? We both made mistakes, but we got to swallow our pride. And, you know, if you want to repair it, you have to put in that effort. And when me and my sister reconnected, that was a big turning point too, because she really helped me as far as like content creation. Like to this day, every time I make a video, I send it to my sister first, and she gives me the thumbs up or thumbs down. If she says no go, I don't post it. I take that seriously. If she says send it, then I send it. You know, I think a big part of that was, you know, reconnecting partially through the mission that I was on, because she understood why I was doing what I was doing. I think she wanted to support that, but we were so mad at each other at the time that we were just like too stubborn to support each other. So she knew what mission I was on, and she understood the value behind that. And when she came back around, I was like, listen, like, this is important to me, and I think that it would be important to Dad, and I'd like for you to get more involved in this. I understand that you have a lot going on right now, and so do I, and it honestly, it makes me feel better to talk to you. But that's the point. That's what I talk about when I say you got to be open with people. Like, I could just bottle that shit up and not you know, let my pride get in the way and not admit that. But because I said that to her, it sometimes just being real with somebody and being kind with somebody can make such a huge difference, because she's been having it rough too. And I know that made her happy for me to just be open and honest with her and just tell my sister that I love her. And it took me a very long time to learn that. Sibling relationships are complicated. Me and my sister, I would say, are a little extra complicated considering some of the things that we've gone through. But we all have our own struggles. I'm sure everybody has unique struggles with their siblings that they feel are unique to them. But at the end of the day, you know, me and my sister, we were all each other had growing up. I don't want to let that go.
I know your dad would love to see this collaboration and how you guys are, you know, championing each other this way. It's pretty cool.
I think so too, man. That's something I think about a lot. I think a big part of me in the back of my mind is always like, if he can see what I'm doing, I'd like to hear his thoughts on that. That's one thing that's bothered me the most about it over the years. It's like, there's been so many situations where like, I just needed to talk to my dad. You know, I had my dad for 18 years and then it was just swept away from me with no warning. You know, there's been so many situations that came up, and I'm just like, damn, I wish I could get his advice. I wish I could, you know, get some guidance. You know, I had to learn to be a man on my own, but I will say that I do think that he would be proud of the man I've become. I choose to focus on what he taught me, not some of the hard times he gave me, because I could focus on the bad stuff forever. Where's that going to get me? It's exhausting to be angry all the time. And I'm saying that from experience. I was a very angry person for a very long time, and it is so exhausting. I found so much more peace in just like accepting things and focusing on what I can control. And one thing you can't control is other people, but what you can control is the way that you react to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I could react by escalating the situation, or I could react by de-escalating the situation.
Yeah. Be the change you want to see.
Exactly. It's that don't talk about it, be about it kind of thing. But I've always seen a lot of use in trying to lead by example. And I think that's what I really hope to accomplish here with Stand Strong Stories. You know, I want to bring other examples of this. You know, I understand that not everybody's going to be able to relate to my story. You know, some people never had a dad to begin with. And that's a totally different struggle in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, I will have somebody on here who you can relate to and might be able to teach you something that I can't, might be able to teach me something. You know, there's so much value in sharing ideas.
I think you should take a moment and talk about challenge space, because I think we're at that point in the story here where, you know, we've talked about Jimmy, the troubled student, to, you know, Jimmy losing his dad, to Jimmy, the veteran, to Jimmy's valley after the military to, his climb back up, right? That second mountain of Stand Strong's a real thing. I'm all in this thing. And now we're in another loop of let's make this even bigger than it can be. And there's a lot from 2019 to 2022. First of all, I got to tell you, the growth that I've seen in you is just tremendous. And it starts with what you're talking about with perspective and active listening. And it's not just to your friends, it's to all these people who reach out to you on a daily basis. And that's really set up this platform that's evolved into Stand Strong Stories now. And you talk to me a lot about how you like to keep your streams and your platform as a challenge space, not necessarily a safe space. And I think there's a really important distinction there that you should talk about as we continue to set up what stories will be.
I like to find a balance. I like for people to feel safe, like they can come here and they can talk about whatever they're going through. And I want you to feel safe with that. And people will make you feel very safe in this community. Nobody will ever attack you, but what we will do is challenge you to think about it different. Like I could sit here and be mad about, things that happen with my dad for the rest of my life, but what difference is it going to make? So my perspective on it changed. And now I have an opportunity to take that experience and help other people. So it's a safe space in the sense no one's going to judge you. No one's going to push you away. No one's going to make you feel uncomfortable for any reason. Mental health, mental illness does not discriminate. This affects everybody from every different walk of life. And this is a space for anybody from any different walk of life. And I want everybody to feel comfortable there, but I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to think about it different because I think the only way to grow is to get out of that comfort zone. Look at it from a different angle. If you focus on what you're upset about, if you're focusing on things to be mad about, you're always going to find it. Just like we were talking about earlier, be there in the mind and you will go there in the body. I think it's very important to challenge yourself to look at things from a more positive perspective. But the number one element behind that is practicing mindfulness. You have to really monitor your thoughts, and you have to recognize when you're starting to, go down that slippery slope of negativity. It's like, okay, that happened, but it doesn't have to mess with the rest of my day. I can still go have a good day. So I think that is very important. So that's kind of the concept behind the challenge space. It's like, I want you to feel safe. You can share these things. You can talk about these things. You can get whatever you need to off your chest, and we're going to help you through it. But part of helping you through it is going to challenge you to think about it different. And that's a big part of what stories is going to be. I want people to look at problems as opportunities to solve something. I'm a firm believer that no problem exists without a solution.
Sure.
So it's like, okay, you're faced with this challenge. That's fine. Let's recognize what the problem is. And we could talk about that, but then we need to focus on a solution. I look at it, you look at the problem head on and face it, take it down, overcome it, keep moving forward. That's my thought process on it. And that's the challenge space.
I think we've got a very comprehensive conversation here around your story, your background, what brought you to this point. I think you should take some time here to talk about what people can expect from Stand Strong Stories. You've kind of already set that up with the challenge space, but talk about the format, the type of people you're going to bring on, the type of conversations that are going to be had.
So
why it's different.
The focus behind stories, I think, is going to be, I want to have the people who display, what I call the Stand Strong mentality, those people who push through the hard times and made something good out of that. I want to focus on what have you been through? How'd you get through it? What lessons did you learn? And what can you share with other people out there who are struggling? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that are just looking for answers. At least the understanding that I have of it from the feedback I get through my lives and on, comments for my videos, that people are just looking for something. People are looking to find that thing. And I've seen it a lot in my Reasons to Stay Alive series. And that series itself was a challenge space. That was me challenging you to look at life from a different perspective. Like we are so often panicked by the media and just focused on all the bad stuff that's going on in the world today that we completely take for granted, and we so often overlook the little things in life. So with stories, I want to focus on lessons learned and sharing coping mechanisms and how people solve problems, and what they can do to share. Like, what can they share with you that can help you get through your problems? And one thing that I'd like to share with people is handle situations with a positive mind and watch what a big difference that makes in your life. I think that is one of the most impactful things I've ever done. that helped me pull myself out of a dark spot. That helped me pull myself out of that negative way of thinking, was just little acts of kindness that made somebody else smile. And when you do that, it makes you smile. And it's a lot easier to focus on the positivity that way. Help somebody. Do the right thing. It's important. And the world needs more of it.
I think we've hit a good point here.
Yeah.
You and I, we've had this conversation so many times, but, and I don't know if we've talked through all of this in one sitting before. There's been so many, we have so many conversations where it's like, okay, I've learned about the military thing, and I've learned about what you were like in school. And obviously since the time we met in 2018, I've known you, but these pockets of your life and these learnings you've had in each of these, they're so intrinsically intertwined. You have this like infinity symbol of learnings that just keep passing between each of these experiences that I don't think we've ever talked about in this concise and comprehensive manner in one sitting.
Well, and I'm sure that's because typically our conversations are all over the place. Kent, I want to thank you too, because I know that you kept me so much more on track than I would have been if I was on my own here. So thank you for that, because my mind is racing, man. I'm all over the place, but I'm sure there's probably things that I'll think about when I get off here that I'm like, damn, I should have said that. But, it's a first time, folks. We're going to be digging into a lot more of these, and I'm sure this will not be our last time hanging out with Kent, because regardless of whether or not we're doing a podcast, this is like a normal conversation for us. We sit down and we dig into topics for hours, man. Like Kent and I can go back and forth forever. And this is something I've talked about on my streams too. Just the value of like genuine, like deep conversation, I think is very important. I think we lack a lot of connection these days, which is ironic because through social media, we're more connected than we've ever been. But the genuine connections, the deep conversations, that's impactful. So yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap this up, Kent. I think we both got to get some sleep, but thank you guys all for being here. If you've stuck around this long, I know it's probably difficult to follow my chaotic mind, but I'll get better at it in time. I just need some practice. Kent, thank you so much for being here, dude. And I hope we get to do more of these in the future, because our conversations are never dull.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's a pleasure, and it's an honor to sit here and talk through your story with you and help you get this next chapter of your vision into market and into people's lives.
Well, it's also important to note, Kent, that you've been rocking with me since the beginning, man. You helped me launch each phase of this, and it's only right that you're part of the first Stand Strong story. I know you've had a lot going on lately, and I was a little worried that you weren't going to be able to make this happen. And I know you're staying up late to do this with me, so I thank you for that, because honestly, I would have postponed the launch if I couldn't have got you to do this interview with me. It was that important to me that you were the first conversation. So thank you for being here, dude.
Yeah, this was cool. It's fun. I certainly hope people enjoy it.
Guys, let me know what you think. Hop in the comments. Tell me what you think, what you want to see in the future, and live for the little things in life, folks.